red versus blue, left versus right, conservative versus liberal. If you watch the news, scroll through social media, or sit at a family dinner, it might feel like America is more divided than ever. But what if I told you that this division isn't a flaw, it's a feature? We live in a country built on opposing ideas. One side says, we must conserve traditions and values. The other says, we must adapt and progress. This tension, this push and pull, is not destruction. It's democracy in action. Without debate, without disagreement, we don't grow. The left and the right are not enemies. They are necessary counterbalances that force each other to refine ideas, eliminate extremes, and, in the end, find solutions that work for the majority.
Even at the birth of this nation, debate was essential. The Constitutional Convention of 1787 was full of intense disagreements. Federalists and anti-federalists fought over how much power should be given to the central government. Some wanted a strong federal system, while others feared tyranny and demanded more state control. The result? A compromise. The U.S. Constitution with checks and balances to ensure no one side could dominate.
Throughout American history, pivotal debates have shaped our nation. In 1858, Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas engaged in a series of 7 debates, primarily focusing on the issue of slavery's expansion into new territories. These discussions not only highlighted the nation's deep divisions, but also underscored the importance of open discourse in addressing critical moral and political issues. Fast forward to 1960, the first televised presidential debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon marked a turning point in political communication. An estimated 70 million Americans tuned in, witnessing firsthand the candidates' contrasting visions for the country. This event emphasized the power of media in politics and the importance of public engagement in the democratic process. Some countries don't have this balance. In authoritarian regimes, there is no debate. There is only one voice, one truth, one direction. In America, the system is designed to ensure that no one ideology runs unchecked. Host, we might argue, we might disagree, sometimes loudly, but we do so freely, and that's something most of the world doesn't have. If you still think America is too divided, let's look at what happens in countries where debate is crushed. In nations with one-party rule, policies aren't debated, they're dictated. There's no room for questioning, no checks and balances, no public opposition.
That's the reality when you don't have political opposition. No accountability, no alternative solutions, just power, unchecked. And history shows us where that leads.
For decades, the Soviet Union silenced opposition. There was one party, one way of thinking. And what happened? The system became so rigid, so unwilling to change, that it collapsed under its own weight. That's what happens when you eliminate debate. You eliminate adaptability.
One of the first major political debates in America was over representation. Small states wanted equal representation. Big states wanted it based on population. This led to the Great Compromise, giving us the Senate, equal representation for states, and the House of Representatives, population-based representation. It wasn't perfect, but it ensured both sides had a voice.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was one of the most hotly contested laws in American history. It faced intense opposition, but after months of debate and bipartisan cooperation, it was passed. It wasn't a victory for just one side. It was a victory for America, proving that democracy works when both sides engage in discussion. It's easy to feel like the country is swinging too far in one direction. But historically, when one party gains too much power, the system corrects itself. Why? Because democracy requires opposition. FDR's New Deal in the 1930s expanded government like never before. It created Social Security, minimum wage, and massive public works projects. But by the 1950s, there was a major conservative pushback. Eisenhower, a Republican, scaled back government spending. This pattern repeats over and over. One party swings left, the other pulls it back. And through this tension we get progress without going off the rails. But here's where we have to be careful. When either side pushes too far, refuses to compromise, and views the other as the enemy, we stop being a democracy and start being a battleground. Host, we've seen what happens when people refuse to listen. Extremes, on either side, lead to division, stagnation, and sometimes violence. But the middle ground? That's where real progress happens.
The fear of communism in the 1950s led to one of the darkest periods of political extremism in American history, McCarthyism. People were blacklisted, careers destroyed, and civil liberties trampled. Why? Because debate was replaced with fear-mongering and accusations. It was a lesson in what happens when we stop listening and start labeling.
So what can we do? First, recognize that disagreement doesn't mean division, it means discussion. Second, stop assuming the worst of the other side. Most Americans, Republican or Democrat, want the same things: safety, prosperity, freedom. They just have different ideas on how to get there. And finally, engage, vote, debate, but do it with the understanding that without the other side there is no balance, no refinement, no progress.
Now I get it. It's frustrating. It feels like the other side just doesn't listen. But here's the thing. They feel the same way about you. We're so used to demonizing the opposition that we forget most Americans, left or right, want the same things: a strong economy, safety, freedom, and opportunity. America has always been a nation of evolving ideas. The Democratic Republicans of Jefferson's time became today's Democrats. The Whigs disappeared, and the modern Republican Party emerged. Politics is fluid, and the debate never ends. That's the beauty of democracy.
Democracy isn't about agreeing on everything. It's about having the freedom to argue, the wisdom to listen, and the courage to find common ground. That's what makes America strong. Not one party, not one ideology, but the debate between them. America's strength is in its debate. Keep talking, keep listening.